The reading from Emmett Fox is titled Mental Drudgery is Not Prayer. Expect more from your prayers. The power of your prayer depends upon the amount of faith that you yourself have in it. To pray in the Spirit that, even if this prayer does not do any good, at least it cannot do any harm, is not really to pray at all. Have enough faith in the love of God to believe that a short, heartfelt prayer is just as good as a long one. Too long a session of prayer usually means that in your heart you really doubt the love of God and think that a great deal of effort and toil will be necessary to move Him. Pray quietly and sincerely for a reasonable time, and then leave the matter expecting success. A short quote from Isaiah chapter 25, verse 1. O Lord, thou art my God. I will exalt thee. I will praise thy name. For thou hast done wonderful things, and thy counsels of old are faithfulness and truth.
Last week, for those of you who were able to attend, I talked about spiritual joy and the importance of it and the finding of it and the living in it. Well, what Fox is talking about here, if you will, is in part spiritual joy. The other part is something that Sister Pepper used to talk about as well, which was, don't waste your time with lots of praying. Place it before God, and then go about your business, knowing that God is in charge. And this is what Fox is talking about here, the simplicity of genuine prayer. And I want to sort of contrast here without necessarily being critical or judgmental. I want to recognize that there are people who think there's another way. I remember reading one of Oral Roberts' books, and he talked about a child, I think it was his child, but I'm not positive, who was ill unto death, or at least facing that, and how Oral Roberts got down on his knees, he said, and he prayed until sunup. Prayed, sweating, pleading, and God answered the prayer. That is so different from what Fox talks about. That is so different from what Quakers talk about. You do not need strenuous prayer, or as Fox talks about here, drudgery prayer. Drudgery prayer, we might say, is the form of prayer, but not necessarily the actuality of the prayer. It's easy to go through the notes, so to speak. And in fact, the talk I was going to give to you involved a reference point, the book Primitive Christianity Revived by William Penn, one of the founding Quakers. And he talks about the same thing. Let me see if I can find a reference point here. Okay, right here. The principle of light, life, and grace that Quakers call themselves Friends. They are the religious society of Friends. They identify it as the single great active force in religion. There is so little true religion among those who call themselves Christians, so much superstition instead of devotion, so little enjoyment in practicing their faith, so little real change in their heart that people overlook and neglect this principle in their religious lives, the principle, again, of light, life, and grace. So, in terms of prayer, think on your own practices. Are you comfortable laying out, requesting of God, holding up to the light, to the divine light, being joyous about it? as opposed to worrying, revisiting, worrying again, effort, 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 struggle, struggle, struggle. That isn't what God requires of us. In fact, here's a quote from George Fox. George Fox was one of the two founders, the primary founder of Quakerism, if you will. And he says, "Be still a while in thy own thoughts, searching, seeking, desires and imaginations, and be stayed in the principle of God in thee." Or let me change it to modern language. Be still a while in your own thoughts, searching, seeking, desires and imaginations, and be stayed in the principle of God in you, that it raise your mind up to God, and stay it upon God, and you will find strength from him, and find him to be a God at hand, a present help in time of trouble and in need. Consider that in your walk. Consider that in your prayer life. Are you allowing your prayer life to be stayed in quiet, to be stayed in the joy of the fact that you are connected with this one great overarching being that we all live in, that lives in all of us, whether we believe, whether we respond to it, whether we act on it or not. The Quakers say all of us have it. It's what we choose, how we choose to respond or not. They can label us, identify us as walking in the spiritual path or lost. In the old book, William Penn talks about sinning, but we all know that sinning is when we miss the mark. It is okay for us to do the best we can. That's all that's expected of us. We are, after all, human, even though we have the spark of God within. When we pray, do the best you can, but be joyous in it. If you're scared about something, admit that you're scared, and yet be joyous that you are connected to the one great divine. That is what allows us to be special in our spiritual walk. It's available to every being here. To remind you of what the Peace Pilgrim said as she had her first divine revelation. Oh, this rock is God. This tree is God. The dirt right here, this puddle is all God. I'm God. So when you are praying, it's not that you're praying to something way out there and trying to yell loud enough so that you'll be heard. You're actually talking to yourself, to the divine within you, to the you that is divine, living in divine. That's what's so beautiful about this God and our relationship. Now, there are others, you will meet plenty of them, who don't have that concept. There was a while, several years back, when a bunch of ministers were meeting, and I had been invited. They were meeting every month to pray for a revival in Cincinnati. And every month, I thought, well, what the heck? Yeah, they come from a different set of beliefs, but doesn't mean I can't pray at the same time they are. So I joined them, and the typical format would be one of them would stand up and do a general statement of belief, of desire, and then everyone would pray. Well, I'm used to the Quaker silence, and I'd go down into my silence, And I'd only very vaguely be aware, and every once in a while I'd sort of pop up and look around, and here are these other people. Some of them are standing up and wailing and prostrating themselves. Some of them are running up and down the aisles. Oh, Jesus, you are so wonderful. God, we love you. You're the most powerful, and so forth. Well, that doesn't fit with my particular understanding of the divine. I don't think you need to beg or suck up to the divine one. And, my thought was, as I'm doing it, I don't think God needs this. God knows what he is, who he is, she is, it is. We're just part of it. We're part and parcel. We're co-collaborators, if you were. But the others had a different definition. And the thing you need to be aware of or beware of is however you define God, that's the God that you're going to experience. And that's your choice. That's the choice of each of us. We can define a judgmental God. We can define a limiting God. We can define a God who is beyond our capacity, but that we are intimately connected with. And every part of it is absolutely fine and okay. We walk the walk. We have many opportunities to learn more. I suppose it's possible that those of us think that the unlimited God, that we'll find out ultimately that it's a very limited God, but somehow I don't think that's likely. Most of us have been led from places with more limiting beliefs about God and who we must be in order to be acceptable to God, to a spiritual walk where we are loved, we are welcomed, we are encouraged, we are invited to join in the divine being, to joy with God, to joy in God, to experience God's joy in us. Most of us here, I think, are used to occasionally getting that nudge from the divine, or words from the divine, or images from the divine. We're co-creators with the divine. We are part of, we don't and can't understand the totality of it, but we don't need to hear. But I do suggest, whether it's in our prayer, you keep it simple. As Sister Pepper says, just lay it in front of God, go about your work, knowing that God has already got things in place. There's that old Jewish proverb, for a person of faith, it is no miracle when a miracle occurs. For those of us comfortable with the concept that we have the divine living inside, that we are perfectible, we came into this world innocent and are moving toward greater perfection. And this is a Quaker belief. We'll get to that when I come back to what I was originally talking about. All of us, no matter where we come from, no matter what belief pattern we come from, can walk toward greater perfection. All of us in our prayer can do it easily. My belief has always been connecting with God is easy. Walking with God is easy if we allow it to be. Even when we're standing, speaking truth to power, we can do it, ideally, without fear. But even if we feel fear, that's just part of being here on this earth. There's an old Quaker story. I do not know if it's apocryphal or not. of a Quaker who was riding in the rural parts of England when a highwayman jumped out, brandished the pistol, and demanded all the Quaker's worldly goods. And the Quaker gave him what money he had, whatever else he had, and then the bandit demanded the Quaker stand down from his horse. The Quaker did, and the bandit got up on the horse. And just before the bandit flicked the reins and was about to ride off, the Quaker grabbed the reins and said, "I willingly gave you what you demanded because they are not of importance. But I fear for your soul, and that is worth my life." And he gave him a sermon. Now, the story is the bandit repented at that moment and left a changed person. But the point for the moment is, there are times walking, praying in God, we may find ourselves in strength to do things, to respond to things in ways we never would have imagined. The divine lives in us. We live in the divine. This world is of the divine. So when it's time to pray, pray easy. When it's walking in this world, walk easily, knowing that you are walking in that of the divine, created by the divine. And that is so special. We are so lucky that we have and can acknowledge that kind of relationship with a loving, caring, powerful being that even when we sin, when we miss the mark, will welcome us back. Who, if we allow it, will show us an easier and easier way to celebrate our connection with this great being, to walk in the light. There's an old song sung by Quakers, "Walk in the light wherever you may be. Walk in the light so that all can see." Well, walk in the light. Allow that love to radiate through you. When you will pray, allow that love and joy to connect with the divine within and without. When you are offering caring to someone who is hurting, allow that divine love to radiate to them. Allow the joy of being in the light to connect with them so they can find some joy, like the beginning of a ladder where they can walk up toward their own joy. And each day, give thanks to God that He's allowing us to be part of this wonderful experience, of this wonderful world, and that each day we are given opportunities to make the world a better place. I've mentioned that many humanists have a belief that our responsibility every day is to leave the world a better place than it was the day before for our passing. And that our life ultimately, as we look back or as others look back on, has been one where we have left the world, brought to the world a better being, a better existence. You know, I get people coming through here who, in some cases, we might say, feel panicked. I don't know what my purpose in life is. And it's not necessarily that, I think they're expecting that purpose is going to come down on them like a lightning bolt. or an angel is going to come down and tell them. And for some people, they're lucky enough that's what happens. For others of us, it's just you walk through life each day seeing where maybe with a word, well, before COVID times, maybe with a touch or a hug, with a smile, with a prayer, by living the simple, loving life, we can lift the world up as an entity and one person at a time. And aren't, quoting Dylan Thomas with a change, and aren't we the lucky ones to be able to experience that divine within, to occasionally feel that nudge or the words or the knowing. That in itself is such a treasure. But we can be there. We can receive it. We can be most powerful in carrying out the simplicity of what all of us are called to. The Quaker calling to minister to the world. Each one of us has that. Doesn't matter if there's some other special calling or some other special purpose. Every day, you have the opportunity, even if you're at home by yourself, of holding up the world in prayer, of connecting with the world with joy in the Lord, with joy of being here, with joy of helping make this world a better place. So that when we are done with this earthly walk, should we look back from the other side or toward the end of our useful life here, is I have left this world as best I could, a better place for my having been here, for my having loved this God, and for my having loved all the beings, all the things that are of God.